Hello, and welcome to the podcast, The Guru. My name is Howard Falco, and I'm an author on self-empowerment and a mindfulness and mental strength coach to college and professional athletes and those who are looking for next-level performance and results. The Guru is a podcast offering you the deepest and most powerful wisdom on life and how this wisdom works for you from the inside out. That is, it offers how your mindset has a direct impact on your results. Becoming aware of this process is everything. This podcast is no coincidence. It's been presented to you by you and for you because the truth is, the real guru of your life is always you. Let's see what you brought to yourself today. Hello, and welcome to the podcast, The Guru. My name is Howard Falco, and today we are talking about a very sacred experience. We are talking about what I call the E word, or enlightenment. So on today's show, I am going to give a description of what enlightenment is. I'm going to talk about some of the myths of what it is not. I'm going to talk about my own personal experience of what I went through that might come under that definition. And I'm also going to offer you how you can put yourself in a position to experience more of the wisdom that the universe presents to each one of us every single day. This is an interesting topic because discussing enlightenment is probably one of the most sacred experiences any human being can have. It's one of the most sought after experiences in the world for those that are looking for higher levels of understanding and truth. Dare they take that journey? And I say dare that they take that journey because the search for greater wisdom in life, as one teacher I saw years ago said, is not for the faint of heart, but it is for anyone who wants it, anyone who's willing to go through the process of opening themselves up to experiencing more of the wisdom and understanding that life has to offer. Enlightenment is just like a huge, huge feast to a very hungry traveler. Rather than getting little tidbits here and there or little things to snack on along the journey of life, the experience of enlightenment is like sitting down to the biggest meal you've ever eaten in your life and trying to digest it all. So it's a very, very sacred experience, and it's definitely one that comes after a lot of questioning, a lot of intention, and a lot of desire. And the whole key with enlightenment is you're looking to get rid of, for lack of a better word, ignorance. You're looking to fill the void of a lack of awareness, which is what the word ignorance really means, because I'm going to use it in this podcast, and it does not connotate anything negative in this podcast. In today's episode, ignorance just means a lack of awareness. So searching to experience more of the awareness that life has to offer, or more understanding, shines light in the darkness. It brings confusion to harmony, to understanding. It expands the nature of how you see who you are and how you see your connection to life. It expands the understanding for every other person and human being in the world. Now, throughout the ages, the word enlightenment has been romanticized as something that is a very sacred experience for only a chosen few. One of my biggest messages out of what I experienced and what I went through is that the experience of understanding and universal wisdom or inspiration and awareness is not for any chosen few, but for all who choose. And that was so exciting when I realized that it wasn't for anybody special, wasn't for any sacred individuals. It was just sitting there waiting for anybody who was ready to experience it. So in talking about it today, I hope that this discussion about the idea of enlightenment, first of all, allows you to see through some of the myths and misnomers about what it isn't, allows you to understand it in a way where you open your mind more to the possibility that you might experience it someday, and inspires you to know that this incredibly divine universe is just waiting to shower you with more awareness when you're ready. And whether it comes in little bites along the way, or whether it all rushes in at once in what the experience of what enlightenment has been come to be known, nonetheless, the universe will never fail you in your search for greater insight and understanding. And my discoveries of life and how it works over the years that I've worked with individuals and dealing with thousands of people is that almost all pain and suffering that each one of us feels comes from a misunderstanding. It comes from some level of ignorance to the truth. And again, I'm not using that word in a bad way. It's just lack of awareness. This lack of awareness leads to mental suffering, and eventually it becomes physical suffering. It causes one to have bad thoughts about themselves. It causes one to take those bad thoughts and turn them into bad choices, bad decisions. It ultimately leads to situations that cause drama and mental exhaustion. This leads to fatigue, anxiety, depression, sleeplessness, and ultimately a weakened body and immune system. This lack of awareness can determine so much of one's path in life that it becomes a critical component of self-empowerment and self-mastery to find the awareness that can change everything for you. And that's truly the dedication of all of my work, all my books, and this podcast that you're hearing right now. But what awareness can do for you, a greater sense of awareness of yourself, a greater sense of awareness of the possibilities, it can change everything. Not only how you feel in your state of mind, not only how you experience life day by day, but in all the conditions that you're putting together in each moment for what you're going to experience tomorrow and beyond. This is how critical getting awareness into your mind is. So the big question is, how do you eliminate ignorance and allow yourself to become empowered through a greater sense of awareness? And that's the whole dedication of this podcast. So here's what we're going to talk about throughout the whole episode. One, we're going to talk about a definition of exactly what enlightenment is. Two, we're going to talk about some of the myths that people have put forward over the years about what enlightenment isn't. Three, I'm going to go into extreme detail on my personal story and how I put the conditions together to have the universe open up a little more onto some greater wisdom. Four, we're going to talk about how you can position yourself more to be in that state, to be able to receive this wisdom. Five, I'm going to offer the key steps to how to put yourself in a position to receive this wisdom, and then we'll close the podcast. So my definition of enlightenment is, it's like a category 1000 epiphany. It's a shift in awareness that happens suddenly and with such a great amount of insight that you never look at yourself or the world again in the same way. Everybody has aha moments as they go through life. You get an awareness about something, you learn something new that you never realized before, and it changes the way you look at something. Like, for example, the first time you hear the true lyrics in a song that you may have been singing to yourself for the last 10 years, and all of a sudden it changes the whole entire way that you look at the artist, the song itself. Every time you listen to it, it changes because you understand it at a deeper level. The other example it could be is like trying to tell somebody what it's like to have your first child or to have a baby. Like, you can't tell somebody that hasn't had it yet exactly how it feels because they have to go through the experience themselves. But you can guide them and help them to understand what it will be like in the process, or prepare them for the experience. So that's what a lot of this podcast is going to be about, to sort of build an understanding so that it will help you be in a state where it's more conducive for you to experience it yourself, or you just have a general greater understanding of what it is, so you can make the choice as to whether or not you want to continue down the path. In Greek philosophy, one of the most famous sayings is "know thyself." It's in ancient Greek. aphorism that was one of the first of three maxims inscribed on or in the Temple of Apollo. The two maxims that followed know thyself are nothing to excess and surety brings ruin. Let me say that again. They are know thyself, nothing to excess, and surety brings ruin. And as I was doing some research for today's podcast, when I got to that third one, surety brings ruin, that was an interesting one, because as a tangent here, what that really means is that surety is the same word as certainty. So certainty brings ruin, meaning that life is the one constant in the universe is change. So life is constantly changing and evolving. So my interpretation of that is looking for certainty in a universe that's constantly changing and evolving is setting yourself up for problems, because you always have to be open to the idea of change. You can be 99% certain of something, but you always have to leave that 1% open to the possibility that things can change. And that's so you can be ready for it. Because when you're not ready for change and it hits you, you end up being stuck in time like a deer in the headlights. So while you're certain of a lot of things in life, if there's something within you that just knows that the universe is constantly changing and evolving and that things can always change, you're in good shape, because nothing will truly throw you off balance. Hey, while you're listening, I just wanted to remind you that both of my books on self-awareness and self-empowerment are available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all independent bookstores. My first book is titled I Am, The Power of Discovering Who You Really Are. And the second one is Time in a Bottle, Mastering the Experience of Life. Both are powerful, deep dives into how to harness your greatest power for self-understanding and for overcoming any issue in your life. The books also reveal how to be a conscious creator of your life and how to achieve next level results. Along with the actual book, the book is available on Audible in my voice and on Kindle and iBooks. Also, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you can be updated when new episodes are released. Thanks, and now back to the podcast. So know thyself is one of the big ancient Greek aphorisms, and it's because in knowing yourself, that's where all the wisdom is. Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, which is one of my favorite pieces of work throughout history, says that knowing others is wisdom, but knowing the self is enlightenment. You don't have to go outside your home to know the entire world. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says, self-knowledge alone eradicates misery. Self-knowledge alone is the means to the highest bliss. Absolute perfection is the consummation of self-knowledge. That is how important it is to come to a greater sense of self-awareness. And that is the path that leads to the E word, which is enlightenment. Now, the interesting thing about enlightenment is that the bigger it gets in your mind, the more you're chasing this big, huge experience, the harder it is to have the experience. And I think that's a mistake so many people make, is that they run and they want to chase an experience. They want to have what they've read about through the ages, which is the experience of oneness, or floating, or seeing the unity in all things, coming back and having a radiance about yourself. So people look for this experience and they go on these trips to India and they do these ayahuasca retreats, and there's so many different things that people do to try and have this experience. And I think that that's a problem, because the experience of enlightenment is the result of the expansion of awareness. So you don't search for the experience and then get the wisdom. That's backwards. You search for the wisdom, and then the result of experiencing the implications of this unbelievable wisdom and new understanding is your whole being, your whole mind, your whole body goes into a completely different state, and hence that becomes the experience. So that actually brings me to some of the myths about enlightenment. Number one is that you search for the experience in order to get it. That notion has to be completely knocked out of one's mind. what you do is you are extremely curious about life. You're extremely open to new insight. You have great questions that you really want answered. And you don't hold back in letting life know that, hey, you're ready to understand more. You're ready to receive more. That's what I did. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but that is the key. The other myth about the experience is that you have to go around the world and you have to travel and you have to do these journeys and go through these experiences. That's not true either. They can help. If you want to go to India and sit with a guru and experience that, you can do that. If you want to, travel the world or climb Mount Everest or any of these other incredible things that people do to expand their mind, they're all very helpful as it relates to insight on what life is all about. But you don't have to. You can sit in your home, work on self-reflection, and come to the same realizations that traveling around the world would give you. But again, to each their own, and some of those experiences can be extremely helpful. Another myth about enlightenment is that it's this big secret, and only the secret societies of the world understand this great wisdom, or it's just been hidden from everybody by the Illuminati, etc. That's not true either. Yes, there have been secret societies or societies that have been dedicated to the world's wisdom throughout the last 300, 400, 500, 600 years. But this information is not a secret. I was shocked when I went to start to write my book and I was curious about how much was out there about self-awareness, understanding, and this type of work. And it's in all the libraries, it's in bookstores, it's all around us. It's been laid out for over 120 years, the modern self-awareness movement, which is explaining a lot of this. It's been out there. So it's just about being ready to find it. But there have been societies throughout the ages that have set up to pass on this knowledge. There is the Illuminati, there's the Rosicrucians, there's the Freemasons. So there's been a bunch of groups and organizations that have been dedicated to this higher learning. But I assure you, it is not a secret. Another myth is that coming to this understanding allows you to escape and get out of the world. And that's not true either. And many people who've attempted to take these understandings or what they've learned and escape the world have found a rude awakening in the fact that the one thing that is unavoidable in life, the one thing you cannot escape, is life. So the best thing to do with this awareness is to come back into life and use it to create something really, really beautiful. In the late 1960s, there was a huge counterculture movement where everybody sort of pilgrimaged to San Francisco. Haight-Ashbury, where these two streets met, was like the epicenter of the counterculture movement in the 1960s. And there's a long story of how it started. Richard Alpert, who eventually became the spiritual teacher Ram Dass, and Timothy Leary, both Harvard teachers, started this whole movement with LSD. And what happened was people took these trips and they experienced this oneness and this incredible unity and this connection and this love. And they decided that that was the way to go in life because they were dealing with the Vietnam War. They were dealing with capitalism and just some things that people were really resistant of because it created a lot of suffering in their life. So when they found this drug that allowed them to see the beauty and the unity of life, they gravitated towards it. I think the term was that Timothy Leary had: turn on, tune in, drop out. And it was sort of a metaphor for get real about what life's really about, which is the beauty and the love and the grace and the unity and the oneness. And so they all congregated in San Francisco, this big counterculture movement that was really the birth of the hippie. And the problem with it was because they were using a shortcut to get to this higher level of consciousness and this great understanding, there was no framework in the resting, non-drug induced consciousness of the individual. So when they came off the drug, they had to deal with real life again. And there was a huge conflict in that. They couldn't reconcile the two worlds. And eventually that's what ended up sort of destroying that whole movement. Was capitalism still existed. The world and the economy was still turning. So it became very, very difficult to live under those circumstances without a construction of the understanding in one's mind of how to take that understanding that they received through the shortcut of the drug and use it to build a better life. And I really truly believe that was one of the reasons that that whole movement disbanded. Now here we are today, and people are trying these ayahuasca trips because it's allowing them to experience a relief from anxiety and see something different in the world and gain a greater understanding. And I'm not saying that you can't gain a greater insight and understanding on something deeper in the world, but the true path to real enlightenment or an expanded awareness is where you build the understanding in your logical, rational mind, along with opening the whole right side of your mind to this wisdom. That gives you a good construction and understanding of it so you can use it in your everyday life. But a lot of people use this path for escapism. There's a whole movement that started in the late 70s called transcendental meditation. And it was another way of checking out, going into an altered state of mind by meditating for hours in a deep state every day. But it became this form of escapism. And there's been so many organizations set up for transcendental meditation where people completely lose themselves in this process and they don't want to go back to regular life. They don't want to deal with regular life. So it eventually can become a problem that way when it's looked at from the form of escapism. The other thing that's interesting to comment on when it comes to expanding your awareness is that when you discover something greater about yourself, you lose a little bit of your old identity. Your old identity fades away. That's good because then a new identity can be sort of born about who you are that's more powerful, more expansive, free of drama, free of pain, free of suffering. But if you're not strong enough, when you lose the old identity, you become very, very susceptible to influence and taking on a whole nother experience of yourself or being manipulated by somebody else that has helped you get to that state. And that's where a lot of false teachers come in, or a lot of people who've manipulated other people that have been looking for this experience, and they come to a greater understanding, and then they form, and that's really the essence of a cult, is somebody helps you, relieve you of the former pain you were feeling with a new understanding, and then they end up manipulating you and telling you that they're the one that helped cause this for you, and you should listen to no one else but them. You should renounce your family. You should renounce your possessions. That's happened many times in this process of people looking for something greater in life. So as long as you're aware of that on this journey, that the power is always in you. There is no guru that has dominion ever over your life. You are the guru of your life, always. And this process and this path is up to your direction and your time and whatever's comfortable for you. But it's always important to remember that you have power over this whole process. And actually, this is a good time to mention what the word guru really means. As you know, the podcast is called The Guru because the guru is you. But in Sanskrit, which is the ancient language for Hinduism, gu means out of the darkness, and ru means into the light. So being a guru means you're coming out of the darkness and into the light. And I believe that happens through, again, a greater understanding of yourself, greater understanding of your connection to life, and a greater understanding of how it all works. That's how you become your own guru. The other myth about enlightenment is that you can shortcut your way to it. And while the counterculture movement and LSD back in the 60s or ayahuasca here in 2020 are ways to open your mind further to some greater truth, it is not recommended as the ultimate path that gives you the awareness and the power that can really direct your life. It doesn't have to be done that way. It can be done through the general intellectual search and curiosity for knowledge and for truth. And it can come to you in all sorts of ways where it does not have to happen in an altered state. And again, in the altered state, that's a shortcut. It wears off, and then you've got to deal with the world again. So the best way is to start from right where you are in life, in the natural, organic state that you're in, understanding more insight and information, allowing new stuff to come into your mind, like this podcast or any other work that you read or do in the world, and building and expanding your consciousness to look at things from a bigger and broader and more powerful scale. Also, meditation is a good way to produce self-reflection, because in the process of meditation, what you're really doing is you're trying to quiet all the chatter of the mind. And when you finally quiet the chatter down of the mind, you can allow the room for inspiration, for universal wisdom to make its way into your mind. One of the ways to experience wisdom is through humility, through the saying that, hey, I don't know, I want to learn. And you sort of open your mind, because if you have a closed or a busy mind, new information can't find its way in. And it reminds me of the Zen story that I often talk about when I give speeches, which is there's a young student coming to see the master to learn about Buddhist studies. And he comes to the master and he says, I want to learn as much as you can teach me about Buddhist studies. And they're having tea, and the master's pouring him tea. And while he's pouring the tea, the student's telling him everything that he knows and what he's learned about Buddhist study and how much he's understood and how much he's read. In the meantime, the master's pouring tea in his cup, and it starts to become full and spill over onto the floor. The student looks up and he says, Master, my cup is full. You can't get any more tea in. And the master looks at the student and he says, your mind is just like that cup. Until you empty your mind of what you think you know, I cannot teach you anything. In my book, I explain that the universe, scientifically, they've discovered that the universe abhors a vacuum. And immediately when there's a vacuum, it seeks to fill it with matter and energy. And our minds are like that. When our minds are open, it becomes like a vacuum for wisdom and insight. But when they're closed, nothing could get in. So the minute that you ask a question, you're creating a space in your mind for wisdom to enter. That is why questions are such an important part of the process. Now, why this is such an important topic to talk about is because I believe that more people in the world that open their minds to wisdom and insight and really have that genuine curiosity to learn more will create a better and better humanity as we learn more exactly how to survive going forward. And think about it this way. Survival is based on one thing, the adaptation to change. And as I said earlier, the one constant in the universe is change. It means that adaptation is critical to survival. Another word for this adaptation to change is simply evolution. The most powerful way for evolution to take place or for us to evolve is through the expansion of our minds, through awareness. An aha moment is always exciting because you feel like you're in more control over life because you learned something new. I've also mentioned on previous podcasts or even in the book that the reason that traffic jams occur and what's called rubbernecking when there's an accident or some flashing lights ahead is because everybody's mind, when they go by those flashing lights and those cars off to the side, are glued on the situation for that split second just to see what information can be picked up from it. What can I learn that might help me survive more in my life? Were they driving the same kind of car? Did they have their seatbelts on? What part of the car was hit? Was there damage? Did someone pass away? We're trying to get information related to survival. And sometimes you can't believe the traffic jam. And when you get up there, it's 2 cars pulled off the road and you're thinking, all this traffic jam just for that? But that's what the human mind does when it's curious and it needs to learn. It slows itself down. It takes a look. It wants to absorb everything that it can from that situation. It's a key part of survival to constantly be learning more and expanding so that you can keep surviving in a world that's constantly changing. And we know how rapidly our world is changing right now, whether it's technology, whether it's the situation with our health, whatever it is, the world is in constant flux. So when it comes to happiness or success, it's all about the continual expansion of awareness. Remember in college when there was always that one weeder class that when people wanted to get to the next level, when they wanted to get to their major, there was one weeder class that weeded everybody out that wasn't really ready to go to the next level. Well, when it comes to an expanded awareness or enlightenment, the weeder is who can go from what they think they know to humbly saying, I don't know. Who can go from what's known into that field of the unknown. This is a huge key because you must step into the unknown for enlightenment to occur. And as I mentioned before, it's because by stepping into the unknown, you're opening up for new wisdom to enter your mind. The bottom line is you have to want this really, really badly in order to do it, in order to summon the courage to do that. But if you do, it's there for you. I wanted to let you know that I offer private sessions for those who are truly serious about positively changing their life and breaking through to experience new positive results. Sessions are on FaceTime, Zoom, or Skype and are designed to empower you with a new awareness and strength of mind. This is open to athletes at all levels, business people, and individuals looking to get through and overcome everyday issues. For more, go to howardfalco.com or totalmindsports.com to connect by email or call 480-585-9750. Answers and positive change for your life are closer than you think. Now, back to the podcast. So I'm going to tell a little bit about my own personal journey and story to this experience. And for those of you that have followed my work for a long time, you've probably heard the story many times before in different interviews where I've gone over it. It's in the introduction to both of my books, I Am and Time in a Bottle. But I'm going to take a minute now to sort of take you from the beginning to all the way up until when the experience happened and afterwards, just so you have a detailed understanding of what occurred and you can understand the most important thing out of the story, which is the difference between me and you is there isn't one. There isn't one at all. There's no different favor. There's no specialness. As a matter of fact, that was one of the sort of laughable moments afterwards, after it all happened. I'm like, wow, this is really cool, but how do I go and teach this? I don't want to think that I'm special or different about this. And the way the insight or the awareness came back after that was, hey, don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about that because this information is not for anybody special. It is for everybody. And when I heard that, when I felt that or heard it, or however that information got in my mind, I was so excited and I couldn't wait to go out and share this so more people out there could experience it themselves. So my journey to an expanded mind started when I was very young. I was always extremely curious about the nature of life. I was the kid in class annoying the teacher by raising my hand all the time and asking as many questions as I could. I was always curious about different subjects. I was curious about life in general. And I had an opportunity when I was 14. My aunt and uncle took me on a fishing trip up to northern Minnesota. I grew up in Chicago, and I was never very far from the Chicago city lights. So when we got up to this rustic cabin on this lake up in northern Minnesota, which was about 300 miles or 200 miles, or maybe even less than 100 miles from the Canadian border, it was north of Ely, Minnesota, in the middle of nowhere. We pull up to this cabin, this old cabin with a dock attached to it and a little rowboat. It was like out of a movie. And everybody put their stuff away. My aunt and uncle were tired from the long drive. It was dark out, and I wanted to just kind of explore my surroundings before I went to bed. So I went outside, I walked down to the edge of the dock, and I just stared out into the middle of the darkness of the lake in front of me. Now, again, not ever being far from the Chicago city lights or the light pollution, I experienced for the first time in my life that true darkness that occurs only when you're deep in the wilderness. Also, for the very first time, the thing that hit me first when I got to the end of the dock was the complete lack of sound. I'll use the oxymoron. I experienced the sound of silence, and it was unbelievable. I had never not heard anything like that before, if I can use a double negative to explain it. But I just stood there in this unbelievable silence. And as I looked at this lake, it was completely still. There wasn't a breath of wind. The temperature it was an August night back in, I think it was 1979 or 1980 or 1981. And it was as still as could be out. It was very surreal. And as I looked across this lake, that's when I started to see them. And it looked like there were these lights shining from the top of the water in one section of the lake. There were a bunch of them. And then I looked at another part of the lake, and there were a ton more lights. And then I realized it like all at once that these lights were covering the lake. I had no idea for a split second what I was looking at. And then I looked up. In that moment, my entire life changed. I saw more stars in the sky in that instant than I had ever seen in my life before. I couldn't believe it. The breath leapt out of my lungs in the biggest gasp I've ever had in my life. And I just stared at this unbelievable, magnificent piece of art that was above my head for hours. I could not believe what I was seeing. Billions and billions of stars. The entire Milky Way, which I never even knew what it was before I had heard about it, but I never had experienced it or have seen it. I saw it stretch from one end of the night sky to the other. I was completely and utterly amazed. And as I laid down on the dock, I put my hands behind my head, and as I just stared at this beautiful magnificence above me, thousands of questions were birthed in my mind that I wanted answers to about the nature of life and existence, what we were doing here, what my purpose was. So many questions filled my mind, and I would spend the next 20 years of my life looking for the answers to those questions. So after that profound night and that incredible shift in awareness, I went through my life like a normal person. My parents got divorced when I was younger, or they separated a few times. I left after I graduated high school. I left Illinois to go to Arizona to go to school out at Arizona State. I had always been drawn to the mountains and drawn to the desert, and wanted to make that dream a reality. So I saved money so I could put myself through school and went out on my own to Arizona to go to college. Got through college, got a degree in finance, check. Wanted to get a job in the finance industry, check. Wanted to fall in love and get married, check. Wanted to have kids, check. Wanted to buy my first home, check. All these things were being checked off the list as I was going through my life. But in the back of my mind, these deep questions about the nature of existence were still there. I would still ponder some of these bigger understandings, or try and get to them, or try and make sense of things in the world by keeping an open mind that someday I would figure things out on a bigger scale. But in the meantime, I was checking all these things off the list that I thought you needed to do to find happiness in the world, to find peace and contentment in yourself. And I was working really, really hard. And as I checked all these things off, I thought, okay, I've got most of them here. I need just a couple more. And one of them was, hey, you got to have millions of dollars. That's what pop culture teaches us. That's what happiness is, when you have millions of dollars. And as I'm working my butt off to achieve this, and slowly killing myself in the process, by the way, one day I'm walking through my home, and my kids were 2 and 4 at the time. My wife was in the kitchen cooking dinner. Kids were playing in the family room. And all of a sudden it just hit me that this last thing I was trying to check off the list, this money thing, that wasn't going to do it either. For some reason, it just hit me that money wasn't going to be the answer to happiness. It had to be something deeper. But I knew too many people already in the finance business that had money that weren't happy, that were actually miserable. And when that hit me, I got unbelievably scared, because the last excuse that I had as to why I wasn't happy was no longer an excuse anymore, because I realized that wasn't going to do it either. So for the first time in my life, I was actually out of answers. I didn't know anymore. And that frightened me to the core, where I did not know how I was going to live another day, because I thought, well, if money isn't going to do it, and I've got, I'm married, I'm in love, I have 2 kids, I'm healthy. If that's not going to do it, then what is? And it frightened me. It frightened me so much that in the middle of my hallway on that day, being scared to death, I threw my hands up to life, the universe, whatever your idea of God is, and I just said, hey, I have to know the answers to some of these questions that I've been asking my whole life. What is the answer to happiness? What are we doing here? What is the purpose of life? And I asked these big questions, and I threw my hands up to the sky, and I said, I am ready to understand it. I don't care what I have to give up in the process of knowing this. But I don't know how I'm going to go on unless I have these answers. And I asked these questions, and then I let it go. And I went back into my life. And a few days later, I was in a seminar for the finance industry. And the seminar was a guy who had written a book on the psychology of trading the markets and how our minds play a huge role in that process. And there was one part of the seminar, there were only 20 people in this seminar, where he was talking about how you decide everything about a trade. How much money you're going to put in, what the investment vehicle is, the timing of the buy, when you're going to sell it. You're creating the whole experience, whether it's a positive or negative trade, but it's all being created by you and your perceptions and decisions. And all of a sudden it hit me. I wasn't thinking of it in terms of finance anymore. As I was listening to him say that, I was thinking it in terms of life. And it hit me, oh my gosh. I'm doing this with every single thing in my life. In other words, the answer to one's state of mind is completely based on how they perceive, believe, and react to a circumstance and a situation. That determines your entire mindset. And I was blown away by this, because I was like, wow, this is a piece of the answer I've been looking at, or I've been looking for. This was a part of it. And I could not believe it. I was so relieved. I didn't know how yet I was going to do this, but I knew that the answer was no longer outside of myself. It was how I handled the internal thinking and perceiving of my own mind. But that was enough to get me really excited, because my whole life I thought it was about something outside of me that I needed in order to feel good on the inside. And in that instant, I realized that I had control 100% over that experience and process. And that was enough to put me in a whole nother state of mind. The other thing that was really, really cool about this was that I also realized that I had asked these questions just a few days earlier. And here I was in a totally unrelated situation, but I somehow knew that this was the way that life was answering me. In this one instance, this classroom, this teacher at this moment was directed in some way, in a non-coincidence, towards my question. And that blew me away as well, because I also realized that this is how it's happening every single day of our lives, including in this very moment for you, which is so unbelievably mind-blowing and cool to know that this is how life works. You ask questions, or you say, this is what I want to create for myself, or this is what I want to experience. and life starts to feed you the necessary awareness for you to gain the understanding in order to create that experience for yourself. So you can put the conditions together so you can create whatever it is you want to create or have the experience of what you want to have. I was so blown away by this that I could not wait to start asking a bunch more questions. And then, like a child with nothing but wonder in his eyes every day, I would go into life and look around like, what am I going to learn today? Where is the insight and understanding going to come from life now? And it was an incredible state of mindfulness I was in, where I was picking up the cues that life was giving me almost minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. And so what happened was I would ask a question, and then through a random conversation with a stranger, a bumper sticker, a line in a movie or the subtext of a movie or a song, I would start to see the universe talking to me and feeding me the insight to the answers I was looking for. I am not kidding about this. It is, and still is to this day, absolutely mind-blowing, because it still happens every single day. The more present I am, the more insight and awareness I pick up. And so what was happening was I would ask a question, and then like a week later, I would run into the answer somewhere in life, directly or indirectly. And then it was down to a few days. And then it was down to within a day. And then 6 months after my first experience in that classroom, I was sitting in my office at work, and all of a sudden, a great insight just appeared in my mind. Like I was struck by lightning. And I was like, wow, that's really fascinating. I'm going to write that down. That's a great insight. And then boom, before I could write it down, another one dropped in. And the way I explain it when I do speeches is it's like that first drop of rain before you know it's raining out that hits your head. You're not sure what's going on. You're not sure if it was a bird. You don't know what it was. And then another drop hits your head and another drop, and all of a sudden you realize it's raining. Well, that's what was happening with these drops of insight. Like they felt like they were coming in through the crown of my head. It was like, boom, there's one. I would write it down. There's another, and then another. And I started journaling and writing all this stuff down. And then I just put the pen down because there was no way I was going to write it down as fast as it was coming in. It was pouring into my mind. I was bewildered. I wasn't scared, but I was like, what is going on right now? This is incredible. And I got up from work. I told my partner, I've got to leave. I got in my car. I had no idea where I was going to go. The car kind of drove itself, even though I was driving it. And I drove myself to the Scottsdale Public Library. I got out of the car and literally followed my feet into the library. I remember my heart beating in my throat as I entered the doors. And I went down one section of the library and I was drawn to the philosophy section, religious section, spiritual section. And I looked up on the shelves, and whatever book looked like it was standing out to me, I just grabbed it. So I grabbed like the works of Freud and Jung, and then it was Lao Tzu and Confucius, and it was the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I had this stack of books on my chest that was, 7 or 8 books high. And I took this stack to the back of the library, and I sat down and I grabbed the first book, which was the complete works of Freud. And I opened the book up and put my thumb down and read what he had written there. And I kid you not, what was formerly a completely different language to me, because I had read some of that stuff before, I understood none of it. I now understood all of it to its core. I couldn't believe it. I closed the book. I opened up another one. It was the top 10 sayings of Confucius. Number 1 and 2 in his sayings, I had already written down in my notes before. I couldn't believe it. I closed the book. I opened another book. I think it was the New Testament. I read a parable or two, understood it to its core, saw the misinterpretation by so many over so many years, and completely broke down in tears. I could not believe what I was experiencing. To this day, it is truly an unspeakable moment of grace and humility. I just couldn't believe that amount of wisdom and information would ever have entered my mind. But after years of asking questions, after wanting to know the answer so badly, and after reaching a moment where I didn't know how I was going to go on, and the key factor being I was willing to give up anything for it, somehow I had opened my mind in a way that I didn't judge the way the information was coming to me. I didn't get scared about what it was presenting to me. When it changed the way that I looked at myself, or it changed the way I looked at the world, I wasn't scared. I was open to it. And it just poured in. I remember one of the first things as I'm sitting in this back of the library in tears, asking, why me? Who am I? Some dude with a family in the middle of Scottsdale, Arizona. Like, what makes me any more worthy of anybody else from receiving or experiencing this? And it was really cool the way the answer came back, which I alluded to earlier, which was, Howie, you don't have to worry about being special, because this information is not for anybody special. You're not any more special than anybody else, and no one's more special than you. We're equally important in this universe, to the universe, to life, to whatever your definition of God is. There is no one greater or worse than. It's just about who is ready to experience this insight, to take it in. And the beauty is you can take it in, like I said, in small bites, or you can drink from the fire hose, which is really what I did. And then the second fear was, I knew immediately, gosh, I want to share this. This is meant to be shared. And then this fear came over me like, well, I know it was humility that got me to this point. If I go and share it, am I losing that humility? And again, the answer came back, no, not at all. Again, this work is for everybody. You can choose who you want to be in the world and what you want to do to help other people. That's not a bad thing at all. And as long as you keep your humility about yourself, you'll be fine. And that's how I knew that I could go out and I could begin to write and teach and speak about this work. And that's what I began to do. I took some time to get my arms around the material and to get it into a way and shape and form which it could be deliverable and people could understand it. But I've never stopped. And this happened 17 years ago, and there hasn't been a day that I've rested from teaching and sharing this. But that is my experience of what I guess is called, I say the E word. I don't even like to use the word, and I haven't really used it in any of the books. But that is my experience of enlightenment, of being ready for a breakthrough and being open to receive it. I am still unbelievably humbled and grace-filled to this day, and I've made it my passion and my intent to share as much of this work as I can for the rest of my living life here in this physical time, and then hopefully to build some sort of a way in which people can study this work for years to come, whether it's from me or from anybody else. But again, the important thing to remember is that as you're listening to these words, to know that this information sits here waiting for you as well in the time and the hour that you choose. And actually, you're choosing it right now kind of by listening to this podcast in a way. But there's so much more to know and to understand. So just know that there should be no doubt about your worthiness to receive any of the answers to life at any time. So let's talk about how you put the conditions together for your own self to experience more of this wisdom on a daily basis. And I've put some steps together to follow. So the very first step is you have to have a strong intent, a strong will for this information, and really a deep yearning to know more. And this cannot be understated. You have to be willing to give up some of your old beliefs, some things you may have hung on to for a long time about the nature of life and existence. And for each person, it's going to be different to see what kind of layers there are to your belief system and how hard you hold on to some things versus others. But you have to have a strong will in order to be able to let go of old beliefs to take on some new ones about the truth about life. Number two is you have to have a very open mind. And you have to have a willingness, like I said, to let go of previous beliefs, but you have to have an open mind onto some new information that's going to change things for you. Three is you've got to have a a deep trust in life. You have to understand that life is connected to you in every moment, including this one. And it's trying to help you achieve what you want, whether it's finding love in your life in a relationship, whether it's getting to the next level of athletic success and putting the conditions together that takes you to that next experience, or whether it's being successful in business or in finance with what you want to do with your life. There are conditions that have to come in. There is an understanding and awareness yet to be understood. But you have to trust that life is always working with you in that process. You also have to have no judgment about how information is going to show up in your life. So whether it's this podcast that's sort of upfront and in your face about what, enlightenment is and how to receive this wisdom, or whether it's a conversation that someone starts with you in a grocery store, or maybe you pass by a homeless person and they start talking to you about something. You say, why am I listening to this person? And all of a sudden some deep wisdom comes out of them. Like, that's how things happen. Or you're listening to a song that you've heard and you pay closer attention at the moment in time and you find that there is such an incredible timeliness about that message. Or you're watching a movie and you pick up on something in the movie that's related to your life and what you're trying to accomplish. Like, it's this magical realization that life is always talking to us. It's really, truly mind-blowing. So you have to have no judgment on how the information is going to come into your life. You've got to see it potentially in all areas. And you have to have a faith that even if you don't understand the meaning at the time that you hear it, that you will at some point in your life. And then the last step in the process is you have to feel worthy of receiving this kind of insight. A sense of worthiness about yourself is so critical to changing your life, because it's like permission for you to have joy in your life versus drama. It's permission to have clarity about your life instead of confusion. So going through any process of self-reflection or any work that you do to come to a state where you really appreciate yourself more and see your worthiness to achieve anything you want in this world is a huge key to this process of getting more wisdom in your life. Remember something really cool. You created this moment right now. These words coming to you at this particular time and this particular moment were created by one person and one person only, you. You said you had a curiosity or an interest in listening to something, and it showed up in this form and this shape. I'm just honored to be in the middle of the process right now, but it didn't have to be me. It could be anybody or any piece of information in the world. The key thing to remember is that you had questions, and for this moment, the universe responded in a certain way. That should be really, really exciting and give you a glimpse as to how this really works on a much bigger scale. I'm going to leave you with a quote. This is actually from Einstein, who wrote this in a U.S. science journal in 1936. He said that the eternal mystery of the world is its comprehensibility. The fact that it is comprehensible is a miracle. So keep trusting this life. Keep trusting that the answers will come to you when you're ready for them. And remember that those answers are always closer than you think. Thanks for listening, and so long for now. You can hit the subscribe button to be automatically notified of new episodes when they come out. And please share the podcast with others you think would enjoy it. More information about my books on personal empowerment or inquiries about private sessions or group coaching can be found at my websites, howardfalco.com or totalmindsports.com. You're also welcome to connect with me on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Thanks again for listening, and remember that the one true guru of your life is always you. Until we see what you bring to yourself next time, be well.